Hey, it's Dan. Last year, the state of Oregon became the first and only state in the country to put a ban on so-called love letters in real estate sales. Now, those are the letters that buyers write to sellers in hopes to gain some sort of influence or favor or preference with them. Traditionally, in cases when you had one buyer writing one offer on one house, the letter might be used as a way to try and inspire the seller to be a little more flexible, whether it was to come down on price, pay closing costs, etc. Over the last couple of years, the letters got more common as multiple offer situations became much more common as well. So now buyers were saying, look, we recognize that a lot of offers might start to look the same after a while, and it might be difficult to choose one. So maybe there'll be something about us personally that you like that will make you choose our offer over this one when they're very much apples to apples. In cases where we submit offers with letters included, one of the reasons we do it is, hey, our offer might not be the highest and they may not have offered the best terms, but maybe if you like how we present as brokers and you like what our clients as buyers have to say as prospective new owners of your house, you'll come back and at least counter our client versus going with somebody else. Then at least our client has the opportunity to say yes or no. That's kind of how we've used the letters. But in general, the idea is it's a pick-me situation right now. The reason that letters have come under such close scrutiny is that buyers, probably not on purpose ever, or at least very rarely, may communicate a lot of information that sellers legally aren't supposed to consider. So fair housing rules, for example, in this case, say that sellers should not take into consideration the buyer's race, ethnicity, country of origin, where they're from, gender, sexual orientation, whether they have disabilities, whether they're married, whether they have kids, so forth. So one of the strongest arguments against the letters is, hey, if the seller isn't supposed to use that information, in other words, show preference to a certain race or a certain gender, a certain sexual orientation, if they're not supposed to use that information, why make it available to them? And there's a reasonable argument to be had there. The notion is kind of, hey, if this could put people in a difficult spot and there's a potential for discrimination, let's just not communicate it, and then it's off the table. Opponents of the ban, however, said that the ban itself was a violation of free speech, that buyers should be able to write a letter to the sellers and the sellers should be able to read it. It's their house. It's a private sale. And in the end, a judge ruled against the ban, citing First Amendment concerns over freedom of expression and free speech for buyers, sellers, and the realtors. Admittedly, I didn't think realtors would be cited as a reason, but there was language in there that said that it did infringe on the realtor's ability to communicate on behalf of the clients. Now, interestingly, the ban didn't actually restrict realtors in any way. It said that the buyer's letter could not be submitted to the seller. Buyer could write it, of course, but it couldn't be submitted to the seller. It didn't say that agents couldn't communicate that information or the same message in an email, text, video, or a phone call. But there were concerns by some people in the industry that this is where that would lead. It starts with a ban on the letters, and then later it's going to be agents can't reveal the marital status of the client, the race of the client, orientation, etc. So you have to say Bob and Susie are interested in the house, but you can't say how Bob and Susie know each other, for example. Love letters are now allowed in the state of Oregon again. So should we expect to see them make a big return? Not really. There's been a slight uptick in my experience seeing them back in transactions, but realistically, there's a lot of agents individually and a lot of brokerages that have said, you know what, we want to steer clear of the potential for housing violations, fair housing violations, so we're just not going to have the letters. We're not going to support our buyers in writing them, and we're not going to submit them to the sellers if we've received them. Now, I don't know how that works out if the seller asks for it and the agent says, no, I won't give that to you. That might create a little bit of a conflict, but I don't know how much that has come up. But the fact is that there are agents who won't deal with the letters and there are brokerages who are making it policy. And on the whole, there's not a First Amendment issue there because these are individual business owners and brokerages making decisions for how their businesses will run. They're allowed to say whether or not they're going to use letters or not. Additionally, down the road, we might see language come from a local association of realtors, state association, or the national association that might put some restriction on this. The challenge will be if they want to either ban the letters or restrict the language in them, they're going to have to decide how tough they want to be on it and if they're going to target all protected classes. Again, Bob and Susie and I just got married and we can't wait to buy our first house, communicates that if Bob says, Susie and I just got married, aren't excited to buy the house, it communicates that they're married and that they're heterosexual. And technically, the fair housing laws say that that's irrelevant to the seller. Is the industry ever going to get to a place where it says none of this information can ever be transferred? I just don't know, because I don't think the public wants to be that detached or wants to keep that much information detached. They may have to, in the end, decide that they want to keep race and ethnicity and maybe orientation out of it, as those have been the biggest issues so far. But they may say that we're not going to police it at the level that people can't mention if they have kids or not, which, again, technically the sellers aren't supposed to consider it, though let's face it, that happens all the time. So again, love letters are no longer banned. They're allowed in and by the state of Oregon, but it's going to be up to individual agents and their brokerages as to whether or not they will use them, whether they'll write them up with the buyer and submit them, and whether they'll submit them to a seller upon receipt. Let me know what you think. If you're a buyer, do you prefer to be able to write the letter, or do you like the idea of them being removed? And if you're selling your house, do you want letters coming in from the buyers? Or do you feel like, hey, show me the contract, let me make a decision based on that information and that information only? Let me know in the comments or shoot me a message, because I'm curious how people outside the industry feel, as sometimes within the bubble, the conversations change up a little bit. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to hearing from you.